Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Tech Shift F9 podcast. I'm your host, Maurizio, and this is the podcast that talks about career transformation and pivots in the age of technology and beyond. I'm super excited today about hosting Rachel Gallagher. Rachel is a former school teacher, then became beauty queen. She's now a model and a fashion writer, and brings a whole host of information and experience about the fashion world, which I completely lack. So that's going to be an interesting conversation. Hi, Rachel. Thank you for coming on board.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So, Rachel, let's start from the top, shall we? You started your professional career as a high school English teacher, and then you went into fashion as a beauty pageant, as a model. Now you're writing. How'd you go about doing that change in your career?
Well, it's not something that I ever planned to do. It just kind of
Okay.
happened. So I knew that I always wanted to be a writer since I was a little girl. Like I used to write my own little stories and all that sort of stuff. And I knew that that's something that I wanted to study and pursue. So I told my parents, I want to be a writer. Then they turned around and said to me, look, you have to be a little bit realistic here.
Right, get a real
Um,
job.
Exactly, exactly. Well, both of my parents, they work in education in some form, so mostly like tertiary education. My mum is a university lecturer, and my dad used to teach people like stenography, like court reporting. So I come from that sort of a background. And so my parents have seen that, education is such a great pathway, for your own life. And you also help people on the way, which is something that I love to do. So that's kind of why I became an English teacher, because I wanted to be a writer. My parents wanted me to do teaching, and I also wanted to do teaching. So that's kind of how that all came together. And then as for the modeling and the fashion sort of stuff, and also the beauty queen things, that kind of all happened organically, which is a really interesting story
Okay.
that I think your listeners will get a lot of value out of. It's quite got a little bit of twists and turns, and yeah, I'm really happy to go through it with you.
That's great. And one thing before we delve too much into that, just right off the bat, I mean, you were dealing with high school kids, which, you know, I have three boys and they went through their high school periods. It was horrible. Teenage years are terrible. Um, did that give you some practical skills and insights into the fashion world? Is the fashion world dominated by that kind of profile, really difficult people to handle, or?
Well, I think it kind of depends who you're working with. I think the fashion industry has a reputation. We've all seen The Devil Wears Prada and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. We've all heard the stories, that it can be very difficult, notoriously difficult to work in. But what I've found when I've been working in fashion is that most people are very friendly. They're very passionate about what they're doing. And sure, it is, a mile a minute. It's a very busy industry. Like there's always things that are changing and going on. But everyone's there because they love what they're doing, and that's what matters to them.
So, Rachel, let's then talk a little bit about your fashion journey. I mean, maybe as a young girl, that was an area of interest to you of some sort, but how did you go about it?
Well, it's not something that I planned, to be quite honest. Growing up, like, people would tell my parents, oh, you should put your daughter in modeling. Like, she's thin, she's tall, like, she'll do really well. And I never really took it seriously. So it was never something that I pursued. I did more acting and modeling and dancing. I used to be a competitive Irish dancer. So that's kind of where the love of being on stage, which developed into pageantry, which then took me into modeling, which then took me into writing. So that's kind of how that happened. That's where that kind of came from. But I never actively pursued fashion. I never really thought of it as, this is a career that I could do. It was more like a bit of a pipe dream thing, the things you see in movies. But now I'm kind of living that life, and I'm so glad that I've had that opportunity.
And so, Rachel, when you started your first gigs in the fashion world, uh, surely it must have been quite different from teaching kids, right? And what were some of the biggest surprises or challenges that you faced early on, and how did you go about trying to handle them?
Yeah, definitely. I think networking is pretty difficult when you first start. I think that's in any sort of industry, let's be honest. But for me, when I started out modeling, I had no idea what I was doing. There's no like, trainers
Playbook.
for modeling. Yeah, there's not really a playbook, no. And so I didn't really have anyone to learn from. And that can be really difficult. And when, young models now come and ask me for advice, because on Instagram, that's kind of what I do. And that sort of happened organically as well from people asking me questions and stuff. I'd make content to help them out with that and teach them about it. Um, so that sort of stuff. Yeah, I never really pursued it or anything like that. I didn't know what I was doing, and I just kind of learnt along the way, which I
Right.
think was very helpful. And coming from a background where I've done a lot of study, I have a lot of degrees, so like I love to learn, and I love the process of learning. I also love teaching, so I understand that as well. So that's kind of how I learned. I just tried and failed and tried and failed until I found something that worked for me.
It's interesting that you've combined the experience and interest that you have in the education world, whether it's for yourself or for others, into a completely different area of business, which is fashion. But one thing that also interests me is the fact that you probably were exposed to a lot of international settings because fashion is a really global business. And I believe
Mhm.
you've traveled and done fashion gigs in Australia, of course, where you're from, the US, I think China as well. So,
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
how was all that?
Yeah, well, I'm from Sydney, Australia. So, we're at the bottom of the earth, really. So it's a really interesting, little segment of the industry because it's not super big here. We've only got about 20, I think 26 million, something like that, people here in the entire of the country. So, big place, not a lot of people. So finding those opportunities to go overseas can be quite difficult. And especially, I don't actually have a modeling agent.
Oh,
How I got into, yeah, I've been signed with agencies before, definitely. But those opportunities that I got came through being in beauty pageants. And because your audience can't see us, I am wearing my sash and my crown for the beauty pageant I'm in at the moment. So that's kind of how my modeling career kind of kicked off through beauty pageants and networking with people and then doing a photo shoot here and there. And it kind of developed into what it is today. So it was all like a big snowball effect. And that's kind of what happened. After a couple of months of doing beauty pageants and photo shoots and all these really exciting things, I got asked to go and compete in my first international pageant. And we went to Las Vegas, which was a huge cultural difference.
oh
In
yes.
Australia, we're quite, yeah, laid back. And in America, everyone's very confident, and they want to know who you are and what you do and all this sort of stuff. So it's a very different way of thinking. I came back from that and then I got asked to go and model in China for a couple of weeks. And that was a completely different experience again. And that was about 3 weeks apart from when I came back from the US. So all in a very short time.
Right.
And it was a huge cultural experience. And it was a really great sort of formative era for the beginning of my modeling and then into my writing career.
I find it really fascinating that you're essentially your own agent because I suppose you do need very different skills than those for being a model, right? So,
Yeah.
how did you? I guess it's been an organic development of your own career. You're sort of keeping tabs of opportunities, but in terms of managing your time, how are you handling all that?
Yeah, this is a question I get a lot. Like, how do you,
Right.
have your finger in so many different pies, basically? It is about time management, and you learn that as a teacher. When you're a young teacher, time management is really important. Running a classroom, learning how to direct young people, being a young person, not that many years older than the people that you're teaching.
Right.
So learning how to do time management at a really young age was really helpful for me, plus the other study that I've done. And also plus being in beauty pageants. So I'm preparing for Miss Galaxy Australia at the moment, and our national final is in May. So in the months leading up, I have to organize all these different appearances and talk to people about my platform, which is sustainable fashion, and organizing all these different events that, I'm part of in the lead up to this pageant. Also means that I have to kind of, flex my time management skills. And it's a real challenge, but it goes into all different parts of your life, including into your everyday life and career.
Oh, totally. And Rachel, let's talk a little bit about beauty pageants because I'm not an expert in it by any stretch of the imagination. I think a lot of my audience isn't either. Uh, what does running a beauty pageant as a competitor look like? And what sort of change and impact can you have with your participation?
Yeah, absolutely. Beauty pageants changed my life. I'm going to be honest with you, they really changed my life. If I hadn't
Amazing.
have done my very first beauty pageant, I probably wouldn't be where I am now. So I would probably not have met the person who did my very first photo shoot, who helped me to build my very first bits of my portfolio. So I owe a lot to beauty pageants, and that's why I continue to do them. And that's why I love, Ms. Galaxy, which is what I'm doing at the moment, because of those opportunities that you can get through, pageantry. It opens a lot of doors that you might not really expect. So, what a beauty pageant looks like for a competitor, I'm talking from the one that I'm doing at the moment. So, Ms.
Sure.
Galaxy, what that looks like is we do a lot of community engagement, a lot of community involvement, a lot of volunteering. So I think a lot of people think that beauty pageants are very much like, Ms. Congeniality, right?
Right.
You've seen
Yes.
that movie with Sandra
Yes.
Bullock? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So a lot of people think that, oh, it's just, silly little, tiaras and sashes and all that sort of stuff. And the tiaras and sashes are great. And I love my tiara and sash. But I love the journey of being part of beauty pageants and especially part of Ms. Galaxy more for the impact that you can have on people. So you get to build your own sort of platform. My platform is about sustainable fashion. I have a blog called About Your Clothes, and I teach people about how to live a sustainable life through their clothing, through fashion. So combining my industry knowledge in fashion, my ability to teach people, and my passion for helping people make an impact in their everyday life. And that's kind of how it all comes together.
Oh, that's amazing. And yes, you definitely have a lot of fingers in pies, and
Yes.
but surely you're able to cope with that. And I think your early experience in managing, classrooms of high school kids, I think that's a great life skill for anything that you can do.
100% it is.
Let's dig in a little bit into the beauty pageants a bit more. I mean, it's very interesting to me that you have to build a platform. So to me, rather than beauty pageants, maybe the right name should be role models, right? You're trying to,
Mhm.
I think, put yourself out there and capture an audience with a theme that is important to you. And yours is sustainable fashion. Um, so tell us a little bit how you are working on that and what you're planning to achieve in with your platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if I were to win Miss Galaxy Australia, so that's the national competition, we end up going to the international competition, which is in America, which is in Florida later on this year. So, if I were to win, my platform about your clothes, what I would be doing with that. I have a podcast for that, kind of like your podcast here, how you get people from all over the world and you talk to people about, things that they've done. So I speak to people who work in sustainable fashion, mostly women. All of my guests so far have been women. I originally started out, interviewing one of my friends from the pageant, and then I found these really cool people online who do these amazing things. And my goal was to expand internationally and find people who are doing great things that otherwise haven't really had an opportunity to speak on what they do yet. They might not have their own, big platform yet. So the opportunity that I've had through Galaxy to build my own confidence and be empowered through this whole experience, to have my own platform. I want to give back to other people so that they can have their own platform and then also teach people about how to live a sustainable life through listening to these women's stories. So that's the aim of doing this. I want to give people a platform, teach people about sustainable fashion, and that will be my impact on the world. Yeah.
Amazing. I love that. Rachel, I want to ask something maybe a little bit more personal. Let's see how it goes.
Mhm.
To me, being in a industry that relies a lot on looks can put an incredible amount of pressure on people, particularly young people. And I think you started quite young, and I think the average age of the fashion industry is quite low. And one of the questions I ask all my guests is about their mental approach to the to business, because we're humans, right? We're not just what we do, is how we do it. And I wanted to ask, how has your path been in terms of managing the mental stress of being under the radar or under the microscope all the time?
Yeah, well, when you work in modeling, you're constantly under the gaze of other people, whether it's people you're working with directly, whether it's agencies that you're working with, whether it's other models, photographers, or people who end up seeing your photo shoots or campaigns and all that sort of stuff. Um, I think, you have to really approach it in a way as this is a job. It's a career. It's not about me as a person. So that separation between, personal self and protecting your heart, so holding that space for yourself and also, going out and doing the job and getting the job done to the best of your ability. And that's really all you can ask of yourself, to be honest. Being very easy on yourself is very helpful. It is a high pressure industry, fashion, but having going easy on yourself and showing yourself, self-love, right? I think is really helpful.
I couldn't agree more, frankly. And I think we often don't spend enough time taking a step back from what we do and separating a little bit who we are from what we do. But moving on, um, you hinted at you love education, you have a master's degree in management and leadership.
Yes.
And I just want to understand how does that rope into your plans and your career? How do you want to take this knowledge you've acquired into perhaps the next step?
Yeah, definitely. So I started that master's degree when I was quite young. I was 22 when I started that. I'm not
Wow.
22 anymore. Yes, I was really, really young. So most people in my class were about 10 to 20 years older than me. So that was very difficult, coming from an undergraduate, very young person, not a lot of, career experience, not a lot of life experience at that stage. But I knew that I'd always been interested in leadership. I had been a vice president of an honors society during my undergraduate final year. And that was really exciting. And I really enjoyed doing that, creating the events and meeting people and giving them opportunities to talk about what they do and what they want to do with their life. So I kind of saw that leadership was where I wanted to go. And it's been a theme throughout my career. In pageants, you are a role model, like you were saying before. You're a role model, you're a leader. So that's kind of how it's ended up expressing itself in my everyday life. But, as I get older, I think, leadership is something that I really want to pursue. And doing that master's degree at such a young age has given me that theoretical background to take it further as I become older and get those more practical opportunities and experiences. Yeah.
No, that's amazing. And one thing that I'm quite curious about is you are your own entrepreneur, right? I mean, you're doing all of these activities by yourself. Have you ever thought about uh, joining a company and being part of a company? Do you have some fears or some hesitation about being less entrepreneurial? And the reason I ask this is because often the journey is the opposite. You have a lot of people that work for companies for many years, they get fed up with it, they think they can do better outside, or they get pushed out and they go off and hopefully start a very successful entrepreneurial journey. You started being an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, right off the bat. So I was
Yeah.
just curious, did you ever look at an opportunity to do what you're doing, but with a company on a different platform?
Well, at this stage, it's still quite new for me. I'm still, quite young. So I have worked for myself, for a long time now. I've been modeling for, over 5 years, which is really scary to think about. But I've been modeling for myself for a really long time, freelance modeling. And, at the moment, I don't really have any plans to, go and work for anyone else in this sort of capacity. I am a writer. I do work for a fashion company, and I help a lot with their content creation. And I absolutely love the experience of doing that and using my writing skills that way and helping them. So I really love that. I love modeling. I love doing beauty pageants. And honestly, I think you kind of have to take it as it comes. You kind of roll with the waves of life. And that's what I'm doing at the moment. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your fashion writing. How did it start and where it's taking you?
Yeah, so that actually started during the pandemic because I was modeling. And then all of a sudden, everything went into lockdown and there was no modeling. So there goes my income, right? Gone.
Gosh.
So I decided, well, what am I going to do? Like, I can't sit here and do nothing because that's definitely not my personality. I'm a very ambitious person. So I thought, what can I do to combine my love of fashion and modeling and my skills of writing and, also education at the same time? So I started reaching out to people that I knew, and I knew that they were still, doing drops of products and stuff like that, but they didn't have offices open or anything, or they were small businesses or medium type businesses. So I said, hey, do you need someone to write your product descriptions for you? I'll do it for, $50, whatever. I started very low. And so I taught myself how to do fashion writing. I ended up going to fashion business school for about a year, and I got a certificate in fashion business. So that's kind of how I pivoted during all that time that we had to kind of sit at home. I really made the best use of that time. And it's all about, time management and also self-management as well, and pushing through when it feels like it's really hard and nothing's going to work. You just have to keep going, and you have to find a mission, and then you have to figure out how you're going to make it succeed.
Totally agree. And again, I really like the fact that there are some core elements to your career in terms of the writing, the education, the fashion, but you've been able to, dance around them depending on, the opportunities that came across and that I'm sure you saw for yourself as well. It's that positive attitude that I think is extremely, extremely helpful. And
Mhm.
more generically, I mean, you're talking about sustainable fashion. I think sustainability, of course, is a key theme, given we understand how scarce resources are generally. How do we get people to understand more the importance of sustainability in what someone may think a bit of a niche market like fashion?
Mhm. Well, fashion is one of the biggest industries on the planet, and they're one of the top polluting industries on the planet, unfortunately, as much as I love it. I think people understand that fashion is, I think people know now that it is, a very big polluting entity on the planet. But I think they don't see the everyday impact that has on our planet and the people who are, working in the fashion industry, whether they're garment workers in like Bangladesh or, India, all that sort of stuff. I think you need to find stories of people who are working in that industry, um, which is what I do with About Your Clothes. And I interview those people, like I was talking about before. You have to educate people, and that, sharing those stories makes them care about, fashion, having that connection, hearing that story, because that's how humans operate. We respond really well to stories.
True.
And that's going back, yeah, back to, caveman sort of times. That's part of our essential human nature, is that we love stories. So we have to find those stories, and we have to tell people those stories, and that hopefully would help them understand and care more about sustainable fashion and why it's so, so important.
Another trend that I've seen, and again, I'm not a fashion expert whatsoever, but just generally in terms of let's call it clothing and all that, is the fact that we have technology today that allows people to design their own shoes, their own products, have them manufacture them quite not necessarily cheaply, but quite efficiently, and also to sell them quite efficiently through e-commerce and all that. Is this an area that you've looked into, you're interested in, or do you have any thoughts about it?
Yeah, part of what I really want to do, if when I become Miss Galaxy Australia, is to expand my podcast even more and find people who are doing these types of things. So independent designers, I'm really interested in learning more about. I would really love to find female independent designers. So, if you know anyone, they can definitely hit me up, and get them to have a platform and talk about why they're doing what they're doing and how they're doing what they're doing, why it's important, and sharing that story with people so that people can connect to it and care about it. And I think that's really important. Showing the artisanship side of the fashion industry, I think will really help us combat things like fast fashion.
Completely agree. I had actually a guest on the podcast, Perna, a few weeks ago, and she used to be in HR for many years in India, and then set up her own company, essentially getting the traditional Indian clothes, the saris. They're being
Oh,
produced
beautiful.
by local professionals, but to put them in a context of more modern usage and uh, bring those brands forward. And it was very interesting. Definitely someone I could connect you with if you want. Um,
Oh, definitely.
that sounds all good. And so, just to conclude, Rachel, in terms of your next steps, I mean, you have this beauty pageant coming up. I really wish you all the best for it. But what's on your plate for the next, say, 6 to 12 months?
Oh my goodness, what isn't on my plate, honestly? I do a lot of things. So, Ms. Galaxy, that's, number one priority at the moment. It's coming up in a couple of weeks. So 1st to the 4th of May is when we all do the national final and we find out, who's the winner and who's going to go overseas and represent Australia. So even after that, I really want to grow about your clothes. I've even been working with one of our local councils here and they seem really interested in it, which is really great. And just connecting with more people, finding out their stories and, rolling with the waves of life, like I said before, and, working on my writing skills, being involved with modeling, and rolling with the waves of life.
I love that. I'm going to use that quote, frankly. I find it very inspiring. Rachel, thank you so much for your time. It's been great talking to you and for your insight into the fashion world. I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Well, folks, that's the end of another episode. Thank you for listening. Stay cool, stay positive.